Across the Philippines, people have settled in places that were never meant to hold them. Villages built on ground that moves, coastlines that don't stay in place, and islands where the edge is never far. Some sit beside volcanoes that don't always give warnings. Others rise above water. That keeps coming back. In these places, the line between land and danger doesn't really exist at all. Every day, people wake up, step outside, and keep going. Beyond the risk, there's no simple way to leave. Because sometimes, the danger isn't hiding in the distance. It sits right beneath the surface, quiet, waiting. And nowhere is that more immediate than at Taal Volcano. A lake stretches wide, quiet, almost inviting. But in the middle of this water sits an island, and inside this island is another lake. Beneath that, a volcano that has been erupting for centuries. Taal doesn't rise high like most volcanoes. It barely reaches 311 meters. But what it lacks in height, it makes up for in unpredictability. Steam vents hiss from the ground. Sulfur hangs in the air. The soil shifts underfoot in places where it shouldn't. There have been dozens of eruptions here since the 1500s. Some wiped out entire settlements in minutes. Volcano Island is marked as a permanent danger zone. No one is supposed to live there. And yet, people do. Fishing boats still cut across the water each morning. Small farms still sit on soil that can crack open without notice. You get used to the smell, the heat, the distant rumble, or at least you tell yourself you do. Because here, the ground beneath you is never truly still. Inland from those seas, one city carries the weight of a more recent past, Marawi. It shows what happens when a place is forced to change all at once. In 2017, conflict turned entire sections of the city into a battlefield. Buildings damaged, streets emptied, families displaced. Years later, not everyone has returned. Some still live in temporary shelters, structures that weren't meant to last this long. Flooding comes through during heavy rains. Water supply isn't always reliable. Rebuilding takes time. Some areas remain unsafe. Debris, unstable buildings, unexploded remnants of what was left behind. You walk through certain parts and see what used to be there. Homes, schools, shops, all reduced to outlines. Life continues, but it doesn't look the same. You adjust because there's no clear way back to what it was before. In the Bicol region, southeast of Bulacan, the landscape rises into something far more imposing. Mayon is perfectly shaped, almost symmetrical. From a distance, it looks like it belongs on a postcard. Up close, it's a different story. Ash drifts through the air when activity increases. It settles on rooftops, roads, crops, mix it with rain, and it turns into a heavy paste that clogs drains and weighs down structures. Entire communities live within reach of volcanic debris that can travel several kilometers in minutes. In the past, it buried towns and killed over 1,000 people in a single eruption. Evacuation is part of the routine. Families pack bags, not knowing if they'll return in days or months. Even when the volcano quiets down, the threat doesn't go away. Lahars follow heavy rains, dragging ash and debris downriver, reshaping the land again. You wake up, look at the mountain, and try to read it. Read it wrong, and it doesn't give second chances. Crossing the sea into eastern Visayas, the danger shifts from land to open water. An earthquake off the coast of Russia can send waves across the ocean, reaching these shores within hours. The water might not look threatening at first. But but the movement underneath tells a different story. Warnings come quickly. Boats stay docked. Classes are suspended. Families move inland, waiting to see what arrives. The coastline faces the Pacific directly. No natural barrier. When storms build, they hit with full force. Fishing is the main source of income for many here. When the sea turns dangerous, work stops. Food becomes uncertain. Every warning comes with a cost. Mangroves once softened the blow of waves. Some areas still have them. Others don't. You learn to watch the horizon, the sky, the tides, the sudden shifts. Because here, the threat might already be on its way, long before anyone notices. Back to the north, at the very edge of the country, isolation takes on a different meaning. Itbayat doesn't ease you in. The island rises with steep cliffs on all sides. There's no gradual shoreline, no gentle entry point. Just rock walls dropping straight into the sea. Landing here is never routine. Boats have to time their approach between waves. One miscalculation, and you're slammed against the rocks. Even aircraft access depends heavily on weather. Flights get cancelled often. Supplies don't always arrive on schedule. The winds are strong, especially during certain seasons. Rain comes hard. Temperatures dip lower than what most of the country is used to. Walking between places isn't simple either. Trails cut through uneven terrain, climbing and dropping across the island. Fishing remains the main livelihood. That means going back to those same dangerous waters again and again. You live knowing that leaving the island isn't always an option when you need it most. Just south of Itbayat, Sabtang faces a different kind of challenge. Getting there means crossing open water in a traditional boat. No outriggers, just timing, experience, and a bit of trust in the sea. The trip takes about half an hour on a good day. Not every day is a good day. Waves can rise quickly. Currents shift without warning. Trips get cancelled, sometimes for days. When that happens, the island is cut off. The houses here are built from stone and coral, designed to withstand storms that pass through regularly. Thick walls, low profiles, structures that bend just enough to survive. Daily life revolves around the weather. Fishing, travel, supply runs. Everything depends on conditions that can change within hours. You don't plan too far ahead here. You wait, watch, and move when the sea allows it. Back on Luzon, inland from the coast, the ground tells a story of something much larger that already happened. Pinatubo. It changed everything in 1991. Before that year, it wasn't even considered dangerous. Then, it erupted on a scale few had seen. Ash shot 35 kilometers into the sky. Entire towns disappeared under debris. Roofs collapsed under the weight of ash mixed with rain. Hundreds died. Hundreds of thousands were displaced. The landscape itself shifted. Valleys filled with volcanic material. Rivers changed course. What used to be solid ground turned into unstable terrain. Even now, decades later, the danger hasn't fully passed. Lahars still move when heavy rains hit, carrying old volcanic debris through communities. A crater lake formed where the summit once stood. It looks calm now, clear water, almost peaceful. But living there means crossing loose volcanic sand, river channels, and terrain shaped by one of the most violent events in recent history. It's a place where destruction didn't just happen once. it keeps echoing. In some coastal areas of the Philippines, entire communities live above the water. Houses stand on bamboo stilts, connected by narrow wooden pathways. One wrong step, and you're in the sea below. Materials are light. Bamboo, wood, palm leaves. Enough to build quickly, but not built to last long under constant exposure. Storms tear through these settlements. Waves rise beneath them. Fire spreads easily across tightly packed structures. Fishing is the main source of income. That means heading out into open water daily, regardless of conditions. Access to clean water is limited. Electricity is inconsistent. Basic services are often out of reach. You grow up learning balance, not just physically, but in how you move through daily risks. Because here, home is never entirely separate from the sea. Further south in the Visayas, another volcano continues to shape life around it. Kanlaon doesn't always erupt dramatically. Sometimes it just keeps going. Ash emissions come and go. Gas levels rise, earthquakes shake the ground beneath nearby communities. There's a permanent danger zone around the crater, several kilometers wide. No one is supposed to stay inside it. But people live close enough to feel every tremor. When activity increases, ash falls again. Crops suffer. Air becomes harder to breathe. Masks become part of daily life. Explosions can send rocks flying kilometers away. Pyroclastic flows move fast enough that escape becomes unlikely if you're too close. You don't wait for a major eruption to feel the risk here. It's already present, every day, in smaller, quieter ways. Back in the capital, the danger doesn't come from nature alone. Baseco sits on reclaimed land. Sand, silt, debris, even garbage packed together to create space where none existed before. It's low-lying. Flooding is common. High tide pushes water into homes. The population is dense. Tens of thousands of people packed into a limited area. Houses made from light materials stand close together. Fire spreads quickly here. One spark can move through entire sections before responders can reach it. Sanitation is a constant issue. Water sources are not always clean. Waste builds up in areas with limited infrastructure. Add the possibility of earthquakes, and the ground itself becomes a concern. Reclaimed land can shift, even liquefy under pressure. You navigate narrow pathways between homes. Overcrowded, exposed, and always one step away from another risk. Here, danger stacks on top of itself. Off the northern coast of Mindanao, one island carries a past that still lingers. Hibok-Hibok has a history people haven't forgotten. Between the late 1940s and early 1950s, this volcanic island erupted repeatedly. Earthquakes, landslides, ashfall, and pyroclastic flows reshaped the island. In 1951, one eruption killed over 3,000 people. Entire areas were abandoned. The population dropped drastically after mass evacuations. Parts of the land sank. A cemetery near the coast disappeared into the sea. The volcano quieted down, but not completely. The terrain still carries the marks. Steep slopes, unstable ground, geothermal activity beneath the surface. People returned over time. You rebuild, even when the mountain has already shown what it can do. Deeper into Mindanao, the land begins to give way to water once again. In Agusan Marsh, land and water trade places throughout the year. Flooding can reach several meters deep. Entire communities adjust by building homes that float or rise with the water. You don't always know where solid ground ends. Boats replace roads. Movement depends on water levels that change with the seasons. Fishing and farming both depend on conditions that are never stable for long. Water sources become contaminated. Disease spreads more easily when sanitation is limited. Invasive plants clog waterways. Resources decline. You wake up and check the water level first. Because everything else depends on it. Returning to the highlands of Luzon, movement itself becomes the risk. Here, the road is everything. Halsema Highway cuts through steep mountains, connecting remote communities to the rest of the region. But the same road that connects also isolates. Landslides happen often, especially during heavy rain. Sections collapse. Rocks fall without warning. When the road closes, supplies stop. Travel stops. Entire areas wait until it's cleared again. Farming depends on that route. Crops have to move through it to reach markets. Driving it means navigating narrow paths with steep drops on one side and unstable slopes on the other. You don't take that road lightly. But you take it anyway. Not far from Halsema, the mountains hold something that only survives through constant effort. Rice terraces, layer after layer carved into mountains, they are held together by stone walls and irrigation systems that have lasted for centuries. But they don't maintain themselves. Heavy rain weakens the walls. Landslides take sections out. Without constant repair, the structure begins to collapse. Farming here is labor-intensive. Every level needs attention. Every season brings new challenges. Younger generations leave for work elsewhere. Fewer people remain to maintain what was built over generations. Without that effort, the terraces start to erode. Slowly at first, then faster. What looks permanent isn't. It only holds because people keep rebuilding it. Further along the same range, the terrain sharpens into something more vertical. It's surrounded by cliffs and valleys, carved by the elements over millions of years. Limestone formations rise sharply. Paths wind through narrow ridges and steep drops. Rainfall is heavy. Slopes weaken. Landslides happen without much warning. Travel isn't simple. Roads are narrow. Fog reduces visibility. Movement slows down when conditions shift. Some burial practices place coffins directly on cliff faces. Not as a display, but as part of a tradition that accepts the terrain as it is. You move through these spaces carefully, because here, the edge is never far away. And life continues right beside it. Deeper into the Cordillera, some villages can only be reached the hard way. And the road doesn't take you all the way here. At some point, the vehicle stops, and the rest of the journey continues on foot. Stone steps, narrow trails, sections that turn slick when the rain comes through. You carry what you need, because once you start climbing, turning back isn't always an easy option. Buscalan sits high in the Cordillera, tucked into steep terrain that doesn't leave much room for error. Houses are packed into the slopes, built where the land allows, not where it's comfortable. There's no reliable signal. No steady connection to the outside. When something happens, help doesn't arrive quickly. You move carefully, one step at a time, especially on wet ground. A misplaced footing here isn't just a stumble. It's a fall that keeps going. And yet people go about their day. Cooking, hosting visitors, continuing traditions that have been passed down for generations. Because once you get used to the climb, this place starts to feel like the only place that makes sense. The mountains around Bontoc don't just sit still. Rain comes heavy, soaking the slopes until the soil loosens. When that happens, entire sections of land begin to move. Slowly at first, then all at once. Homes sit along these same slopes. Roads cut through them, winding around edges where there's barely enough space for a vehicle to pass. You drive through areas where one side drops sharply toward a river and the other leans in, unstable, waiting for the next shift. It's not just landslides. Fires break out during the dry season, moving quickly through tightly packed homes built from light materials. Rivers swell during storms, forcing evacuations in communities built too close to the water. Even routine travel carries risk. One truck went off the road and fell more than 100 meters into the Chico River below. You don't ignore these things. You live with them. Because the land provides what people need. And leaving means starting over somewhere that doesn't. Stretching across the eastern side of Luzon, a much larger system begins to show its limits. For years, it served as protection. It absorbed storms, slowed winds, held water in its forests. Entire communities relied on it without thinking too much about what it was doing behind the scenes. Now, parts of that system are breaking down. Forests have been cut back. slopes that once held together begin to give way under heavy rain. Rivers swell faster. Floods hit harder. In 2004, flash floods tore through towns at the base of these mountains, killing over 1,000 people in a matter of hours. You can still trace where the water came from. Paths carved into the land by force, not by time. Communities deeper in the range depend on what's left. Hunting, gathering, small-scale farming. But resources are becoming less predictable. You wake up and look at the sky, trying to read what kind of day it's going to be. Because here, the mountain that once shielded you can just as easily turn against you. Out in the open waters of the Caraga region, exposure becomes unavoidable. From above, Dinagat looks scattered. Islands, small and large, spread across open water. Coastal communities line the edges, exposed to whatever the sea decides to bring in. Typhoons don't pass lightly through this area. When one hits directly, there's nowhere to hide. Winds tear through structures. Waves push inland, carrying debris, flooding homes, leaving little behind. Typhoon. Odette did exactly that. Thousands of houses destroyed. Boats lost. Coconut trees flattened across wide areas. You rebuild with what you can find. Temporary shelters first. Then something more permanent, if materials are available. But storms don't stop coming. Mining has stripped parts of the land. Mangroves that once slowed the water are gone in some areas. The coast feels more exposed now than it used to. Fishing, farming, even mining itself. All of it depends on conditions that shift constantly. You don't wait for stability here. You work between disasters. Back on the eastern coast of Luzon, multiple forces meet in one place. General Nakar sits where the mountains meet the sea, with rivers running through everything in between. When heavy rains come, all those systems connect. Water flows down from the mountains, carrying soil, trees, debris. Rivers rise quickly, spilling into communities that don't have time to react. In 2004, things turned deadly. Floods and landslides hit at the same time. Entire areas were wiped out. Thousands displaced. You can still see the patterns, where the water moves, where the land gives way. Deforestation has made things worse. Without roots to hold the soil, slopes collapse more easily. Logs get swept into rivers, turning floodwaters into something heavier, more destructive. Some communities are far enough inland that help takes time to reach them. Roads aren't always reliable. Communication isn't always immediate. You prepare as much as you can. But when everything hits at once, preparation only goes so far. Closer to the country's center, water takes a slower, more persistent approach. Flooding here doesn't happen quickly. When the water rises past a certain point, it stays. Laguna de Bay spreads out across a wide area, touching multiple communities built along its edges. Many of those areas sit low enough that even moderate increases in water level push into homes. When heavy rains or storms feed into the lake, levels climb. Once they pass critical thresholds, the flooding can last for weeks. Sometimes months. You don't always evacuate. Some families stay, adjusting their homes to the water, sleeping above it, cooking around it, living in spaces that were never meant to stay submerged. Fishing is still the main livelihood. But pollution has changed the water. Fish populations drop. Catches become unpredictable. You go out anyway. Because when the water surrounds you like that, there aren't many other options. Far to the southwest, life depends almost entirely on the sea. Here, life depends on the sea. Small boats move between islands, carrying people, goods, everything needed to keep communities running. When the weather is calm, it works. When it's not, those same boats become vulnerable. Capsizing isn't rare in rough conditions. Strong winds, shifting currents, and open water leave little margin for error. Homes are built close together, often on stilts over water. When a fire starts, it spreads fast. Wind carries it from one structure to another before anyone can stop it. In one incident, around 1,000 homes were damaged in a single fire. There are other risks too. Proximity to international borders brings movement across waters that aren't always monitored closely. That creates opportunities, but also dangers. You learn how to move through it, when to travel, when to stay. Because here, the sea gives everything and takes just as easily. The Sulu Archipelago stretches across waters that have seen conflict for years. Fishing routes overlap with areas known for piracy. Boats that head out for daily work don't always return the same way. Kidnappings have happened in these waters. Crew members taken, ransoms demanded. On land, communities deal with their own set of challenges. Armed groups move through certain areas. Clashes happen. People get caught in between. At the same time, storms still pass through. Flooding still affects low-lying areas. Landslides still occur where terrain allows it. It's not one type of danger. It's several, layered over each other. You go out to sea knowing what's out there. You stay on land knowing that's not always safer. But work doesn't stop. It just can't. Not every geological risk comes from volcanoes or violent eruptions. In Philippines, there is a place called Sitio Pariahan that is slowly disappearing as it sinks little by little. It proves that not all danger arrives in an instant. Sitio Pariahan used to be dry land. Roads, houses, a school, a church. Today, most of it sits underwater. The land is sinking, about 4 centimeters every year. At the same time, the sea keeps pushing in. Storm surges finish what subsidence starts. You won't find sidewalks here anymore. Moving from one house to another means getting into a boat. What used to take minutes on foot now takes half an hour over water. There's one deep well for everything. Drinking, washing, cooking. Electricity comes from small solar panels, if at all. Children grow up learning how to balance on narrow planks and navigate flooded paths before they ever learn to write. You might think people would leave. Some tried, but they came back, rebuilding homes over water that keeps rising year after year. It's a village that no longer has land, but still refuses to disappear. In the southern reaches of Palawan, the threat moves just beneath the surface. Coastal waters that look calm can hold something else beneath the surface. Saltwater crocodiles live in these areas, often close to where people fish, travel, and gather food. Encounters happen. Some end with injuries. Others don't. The overlap is unavoidable. Rivers, estuaries, shallow coastal zones. These are the same places people depend on daily. You step into the water knowing what could be there. Fishing becomes a calculated risk. Even moving between areas by boat carries a level of awareness that doesn't go away. Add storms, rough seas, and limited infrastructure, and the margin for safety stays narrow. You don't ignore the risk. You work around it every day. Further inland, the ground isn't as solid as it looks. Limestone formations rise sharply, shaped over thousands of years by water-dissolving rock. Beneath the surface, there are caves, tunnels, underground rivers, some sections hold, others don't. Heavy rain seeps into the rock, widening cracks, weakening support. In certain areas, the ground can shift or collapse without much warning. Farming is possible, but space is limited. Soil sits thin over uneven terrain. Water systems run underground as much as they do above it. That makes them harder to predict. You walk through areas where the landscape changes quickly. Open ground, then sudden drop-offs. Stable footing, then loose sections. It's a place that keeps reshaping itself. And you learn to move with it. Along the western coasts of Mindanao, the loss of natural barriers changes everything. Mangroves used to shield these communities. Their roots broke the force of incoming waves. They held the soil in place. They gave fish a place to grow. Many of those mangroves are gone now. Cut down for fuel, cleared for fish ponds, or simply lost over time. Without them, the coastline feels different. Storm surges reach farther inland. Flooding becomes more frequent. Erosion eats away at areas where homes once stood. Fishing suffers too. With fewer breeding grounds, catches decline. You see the changes over years, not days. Water creeping closer. Shorelines shifting. Some communities move inland when they can. Others rebuild in the same place, adjusting as conditions change. Because leaving the coast means leaving the work that supports them. Up in the highlands of South Cotabato, the land begins to shift in quieter ways. Cracks form in the ground. Small at first, then wider. Some run through entire sections of land where homes and schools stand. Heavy rain makes it worse. Water seeps into the soil, loosening it, turning stable ground into something that moves. In some areas, buildings slowly shift toward slopes. Not enough to notice right away. But enough that over time, the difference becomes clear. Families have been evacuated more than once. Some relocate, others stay, watching the ground beneath them. Fishing and farming still go on. Lakes provide food. Hills provide crops. But there are other pressures too. Environmental changes, resource decline, even disputes over land. You deal with all of it at once. Because for many, this place is everything they know. At the northernmost edge of the country, the elements take full control. The Batanes Islands are surrounded by open water, directly in the path of storms that enter from the Pacific. Winds here are stronger than what most places experience. Roofs are tied down before storms arrive. Houses are built from stone, designed to handle the force. Even then, nothing is guaranteed. Earthquakes have brought down structures that stood for decades. Storm surges have erased entire coastal settlements. Transport is limited. Rough seas delay supplies. Flights don't always land. You prepare in advance. Food stored. Homes reinforced. Because when a storm hits here, there's no stepping away from it. You face it and wait for it to pass. And back in Mindanao, everything comes together in one place. Camiguin is small, but everything here is active. Volcanoes rise across the island. Fault lines run beneath it. The ground has shifted before, and it will again. Earthquakes aren't unexpected. They're part of the environment. When they hit, structures shake. Slopes loosen. Landslides follow. Volcanic systems add another layer. Gas emissions, ashfall, the possibility of another eruption. Storms still pass through as well, bringing rain that triggers mudslides across terrain already shaped by past eruptions. In 2001, heavy rain caused slides that killed hundreds. It's not one event. It's how these events connect. An earthquake can weaken the land. Rain can finish what it started. Water can carry the damage further. You live with that understanding. Because on this island, we're all reminded of one thing. Everything is linked, and everything moves. Clearly, some places were never designed for long-term survival. And yet life continues. If you thought these places were already pushing the limits of where people can survive, there are still more out there. Places that look even less forgiving. Even harder to explain, and somehow still lived in. Click here to discover the most extreme places on Earth, where life continues against all odds.